When we don't have food, it's going to cause us to panic, just like if we don't have water or shelter. We have basic needs. And if you don't fulfill your needs, your body and your mind is going to really let you know that there is a deficit. There's a major problem. So you don't want to put yourself in situations that you become helpless and dependent on others to rescue you. Right now, if you're listening to this, most likely you're in a good situation, that you're not in an emergency. You hopefully have some resources, or you have the ability to make choices to better your situation, so that in the future, if, and it's most of the time it's just a matter of when, something bad happens, you can overcome it a lot easier. I have personally had to overcome some emergencies in the last 10 years that were classified as short term. I've been snowed in for 2 weeks at a time. I've been in ice storms that have required almost 2 weeks to overcome that. Tornadoes that required to be basically landlocked because the roads were all torn up for around 4 days. And there's people that I know who have been involved in floods, flash floods, that have just totally destroyed roads and even their homes. And so there's some really bad stuff that can happen. Mother Nature and even accidents from humans can cause a world of hurt for a lot of people. So when we look at short-term emergencies, we need to have various needs met, and one of them is food. And so let's talk about that. I look at pre-cooked, ready-to-eat foods that require little to no prep time, that are adequate in shelf life, that are full of variety, systems that have variety and that are balanced in diet, and that have the appropriate amount of calories. I recommend you to rotate these goods throughout the year, and about every 6 months to actually do a full inventory. Sometimes we sneak things and we just don't replace it. That's what I've noticed. So we have different categories within this storage that we're putting together here. Canned goods, it could be with vegetables, fruits, meats. There's MREs, which stands for meals ready to eat. You can find the military or the civilian versions. You can buy the individual elements to make these kits if you don't want to buy them complete. They are kind of expensive. They do have some pretty good shelf life, but that's mainly because of all the heavy duty packaging and all the preservatives. So there's some downside on the health aspect of the MREs, but if you're into that, you're into that. What about pre-packaged commercial foods? Snacks these days are becoming a little bit more healthy. At least you can find them a little easier. But for the bulk of what's out there, they're still very bad for you. Of course, this video is not preaching about what foods you should buy, but just be aware that energy bars are typically full of sugar, and that most snacks, probably over 95%, are just completely bad for you. And you might want to look at maybe like raw nuts or trail mix and things like that that are much more healthy for you. Okay, dried foods, maybe dehydrated foods that you could just eat right out of the package or can, that don't require, to be rehydrated. Freeze-dried foods can be the same way. Not all freeze-dried foods have to be reconstituted or cooked or reheated or any of that kind of stuff to be editable. So you have things like bananas and sweet peas. There's all kinds of fruits and vegetables that can be eaten from a freeze-dried type of context. Don't forget to add various supplies of salt, pepper, and other spices that you may like to kind of make things to your taste. Sprouting, sprouting is something that people forget. There is a 2 to 3 day lag time, obviously, for things to sprout. But once you get going, you'll have that. If you have a garden and you just happen to be sheltering at your location where you live, you may have fresh produce, so don't forget that. Water, even though this is not a video about water, we have to throw that in there, because if you're consuming food, you need water to help it digest. So even though on the low end, a minimum of 1 gallon per person is what people say, and I agree, just for, the ability to stay hydrated and to help you digest your food, but 2 to 3 gallons is really a more practical minimum for everybody. A gallon for drinking and for use in digestion, another gallon for sanitation, another gallon in case there's a hot climate to keep hydration at a priority level. So I think 2 to 3 gallons. I personally do 5 gallons, but that's up to you. Foraging, people like myself have large yards. And if you don't like to cut grass, like I don't like to cut grass, sometimes you get a lot of wild edibles, a lot of wild greens that are really healthy for you. And if you know how to identify those plants, you get a lot of free food in your yard. So that's cool. Worst case scenarios, hunting, trapping, fishing. But once again, this is not the objective. It's a lot of processing, a lot of time involved, and then you have to cook those foods to be safe. So that's not advisable. You want things that are going to be a lot easier than that, but that's there. It should be there at least just in case. You want to store foods that you normally eat, items you like, that you look forward to eating. Just be aware of how you feel after you eat certain foods. Even though you might love, you might like or love the taste, you might, for example, you might just feel like you can't live without peanuts, even though you have a really mild sensitivity to them. I know people like that, because I'm actually one of those people that I eat peanuts and I typically get a little bit of a stomach cramp for like an hour after I eat them. Now currently I don't almost eat them anymore, but because it's just not worth it. But don't put those kind of things in your short-term cache, your short-term food storage. Because even though you may be able to tolerate a little bit of discomfort now with those foods, you really don't want to deal with that during an emergency. So let's just be honest with ourselves and say, hey, just put things that you digest very easily in your system. You want to store your foods in several locations in case one or two of them was compromised. And in particular, and especially if you can, in separate buildings. Cool, dry locations, dark locations, obviously low humidity, insect and rodent-free environments. Ideal locations could be for storage, root cellars, storm shelters, basements, wine cellars, temperature-controlled sections of a barn, garage, a shed, or even a workshop. If you have nothing but maybe like an apartment, that's all you have to your name, then use what you have. Put your food under your bed if you can't get it in your pantry, in closets, maybe on a shelf, but put it somewhere. I've seen people who made coffee tables out of boxes, and they put a cover or a blanket over it and make a usable table off of the boxes that contain their food. It's just another option. You want to check your supplies a minimum every 6 months if you don't do the rotation. And basically, I would have to say that it's real easy if you do rotation just once a week. Take a few items out of your short-term, storage, consume them, and then the next time you go to the grocery store, you just buy a replacement, and you keep things a little more current that way. In closing, I have one tip for you, and that's to make a menu. You might want to have a menu for the kids and maybe an adult menu, or however your family is set up, that gives you kind of an outline of how many calories are in meals, how many different kinds of meals that you can put together easily, how many meals you have to make, that so if you need in a longer term situation, you may be able to kind of get a little bit further with the food you have, and sometimes you may have to conserve, more food than other times, but it's good to kind of have a meal plan. And so you're not at the last minute trying to figure out what to do with what you have. As always, hey, thanks for coming along. If you have any thoughts, leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for hitting the like button. Thanks for all your support. You guys take care.